Coming up on the show this week, we've got an interview with Brendan Gregg of Netflix. He's got a lot to say about performance tuning and benchmarking, and even some pretty funny stories on how people have been doing them incorrectly. And as always, this week's news and the answers to your emails, all on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. Now, episode 65, recorded November 26, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
We're glad to have you guys with us on this week's episode, right on the eve of Thanksgiving. So thank you guys for sticking around and enjoying this episode with us. And hope you guys all have a great holiday in the next couple of days and enjoy your weekend, of course, as we get ready to go into the Christmas season. So, yeah, lots of fun, lots of holiday stuff. I guess we'll have to pre-record some episodes here in the future. And you know what day Christmas falls on this year?
Thursday.
Is it? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it works, but we haven't missed a week yet.
Nope.
We're not going to start
exactly.
now. So.
Well, on my other podcast, which is actually on Thursday, we're like, wow, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's all fall on Thursdays.
Nice.
It's gonna have to. We got lucky the other year. It swerved around all the holidays and didn't hit anything, but this year it all lined up.
Yeah, your luck ran out finally. Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. It'll hopefully just be this year, and then next year we'll be back to some other day. Cool. Okay, well, let's get right into your headlines this week, guys. There's still lots of stuff happening, even though some people are out of town and out for the holidays. But first up, though, we'd like to inform you guys, of course, of BSD videos when there's conferences and whatnot. Yes. And we do have a whole slew of them to report as well. More videos from this year's Meet BSD and the OpenZFS Dev Summit have been uploaded since last week. Yep. So some of the notables there, or this might actually be the complete list. No. Okay, some of the notables we got. Yep. Robert Ryan at the Heart of the Digital Economy.
That's from Meet BSD.
Yep, and then FreeBSD and ZFS, the indestructible duo.
That's the one for the hard drive.
They were destroying. Yeah, that was where they were destroying the hard drives
with hammers
on stage.
That's awesome.
Get to see McCusick destroy a drive with the hammer. Yep. So very cool. Go watch that. That's a fun one.
And I guess Powell was there destroying stuff with the hammer, and a bunch of other people too. So.
It's always great to see file system guys, take frustration out on spinning disks. That's great.
Yeah. Plus, Richard Yao, who's the lead of ZFS on Linux, gave a talk about libzfs core and the IOCTL stabilization that they're working on. So that,
nice.
Trying to solidify the user land versus the kernel side and make all the ZFS versions work together. They have the company lightning talks from OpenZFS. So this is all the different, a bunch of different companies that are doing interesting things with ZFS, giving a quick rundown of what they're doing with it, what features they'd be interested in, what code they're working on that they would like to give back, and so on. They also had a hackathon with presentations and awards. So nice. After the second day of their conference was literally all just writing code. A lot of it was just getting started on different things or finishing up things, but they gave out some awards for that, and that was cool. And they had the other talk, which I was really interested in, about fast file cloning,
nice.
Which I really want to dig into that and watch that video and read the slides and figure out what's going on there.
That was at OpenZFS conference, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And then back to Meet BSD, Rick Reed gave the 500 million unsuspecting FreeBSD users. That was one of the people from
the WhatsApp
that was out at Meet BSD. And then Alex Reese and Matt Ahrens gave the talk everybody's been waiting for at the ZFS Developer Summit, which was device removal, being able to remove a hard drive from a RAID Z array or whatever on your ZFS. And then they also talked about channel programs, which is another interesting feature in ZFS, to be able to do a bunch of administrative commands atomically all in one transaction group. And then the one we've been...
David Maxwell.
Yes. So we've been telling people about PipeCut, and everybody wants to see it. And since the tool's not out yet and the website's not ready yet, you can at least see the video where he's showing it on the projector. And while you might think it's awesome until you see it, you don't really understand how good it is.
Yeah, how useful this is going to be to anybody who uses the command line.
It really doesn't matter if you're a newbie or like a super pro. This is useful.
Yeah, this is really cool. This is one of the first, I guess, command line shell utilities I've seen in a long time where this could really change how I do a lot of development.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I'm
And
very
just
excited. Hurry up,
administration,
David. We
all
want the
kinds of
code.
stuff. Yeah. It doesn't
All
have
in
to
the
be
port
perfect.
stream.
We just want to start playing with it right now.
Yeah, I'll file bug reports. I promise.
Yep.
Like if something doesn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, definitely go watch that. We did get an interview with him as well, which will air in a future episode.
Yep.
So you can see a little bit about
Yeah,
PipeCut and
yeah.
some of the
He talks about it some more.
ideas that went into it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, we had a giant list of videos last week as well. So, you know, if you have lots of time on your holiday and you're not sure what to do, you can definitely catch up on what's been going on. Because
Cool.
without some free time, I'm not sure how you would catch up.
Mm-hmm,
Too much awesomeness at once.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think we got a little break here before other conferences start back up with Asia. But
well, no,
you were just posting about the
yeah,
Russia one.
Yandex is hosting BSD 2014, which implies it's before the end of this year. I didn't see the date, but only parts of the webpage are in English, so it was a little hard.
I didn't do any translation on it here, so
but we'll hopefully have more coverage of that soon. I noticed.
Looks like it's in Moscow.
Yep. Or I don't somewhere in Russia.
Russia? Okay.
But you know, Scott Long and Sean Bruno are going to be there. Alexander Moten from IX, a bunch of other people. Guys from Nginx are going to be there talking about their improvements, and they've been working a lot with Netflix. So there's lots of interesting technical stuff going on there.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So definitely, you know, keep your ears open and you know, plan on it this next year. See if you can make it out to at least one BSD conference. I mean, shoot, we got ones in Russia. We did Bulgaria this last year. Of course, Canada. There was one in California. And
one in
course,
Asia,
Tokyo every year.
Basically, no matter where you are in the world, there's one that comes reasonably close to you.
Hopefully closer to you, where you can try and make an effort to get out there and go to that. And of course, me and Alan try and make it to most of those.
Exactly.
So if you can, come on out. It would be a lot of fun. I know we enjoy them.
We do.
And I'm sure you would as well, especially if you're any kind of interested in BSD or operating system architecture or any of this kind of nerd stuff that we enjoy a lot.
Whether it's, you know, big servers or tiny embedded stuff, there's always a group of people talking about it.
Yeah, that's
right. Half of the point of the conference isn't even the talks and stuff. It's, you know, the people you get to sit with at dinner and talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the social aspect.
I think it was my very first BSD, very first BSD can. And I arrive at the pub the night before the conference, and I don't know anybody at all.
Sure.
This is my first conference. I've never met anybody in person except for Drew at a different event. And I just saw it, and I just, as I'm walking past the patio to go into the pub, I just hear some people over here talking about under-provisioning SSDs to keep the performance up. And I'm like, you guys must be with me.
At the conference.
Oh, look, a free seat. And I pull up a seat, and you get to talk about it. And it was great.
You guys have an advantage. We're doing kind of a public service here now because we get a lot of these developers actually on where you can see them and you know what they look like now.
Yes,
so when you go to the conference, you're like, oh, I remember that guy. From
well, not only that, but if you end up sitting at the table with them at dinner, you already know a little bit about what they do, so you have a conversation starter. Oh, so you're the guy that ported ZFS, or you're the guy that did this or that or whatever. It just it definitely helps start a conversation.
That is true. That is true.
Yes.
Well, very cool. So again, yes, try and make it out to one next. Yeah. Sorry, this was kind of an aside.
Yes, but there are. There's there's going to be Asia BSD Con in Tokyo, and then later on there will be BSD Can in July, and then
June.
June, yes, and then. Probably be something in Cambridge that developer only. Then we have
Meet BSD will be in Sweden next year.
EuroBSD Con will be in Sweden.
Euro, excuse me. Yeah,
and then I think there's supposed to be a VBSD Con in Virginia. So if you are on the East Coast of the U.S. and missed out on Meet BSD, we'll be in Virginia next year. So
very cool.
Should be good.
Okay. Now I promise we are going to go to the next story now. So speaking of small and embedded devices, we have a cool article about NetBSD on a Cobalt Cube 2, which used to be around the year 2000 a pretty expensive networking appliance. But in 2014, apparently, you can get these things for dirt cheap. And by dirt cheap, we mean about $40. So yeah, pretty inexpensive. But I don't know if you have the pictures up on the screen here, Alan, but it's cool to see. We got this blog post detailing on how to get NetBSD installed and pretty much set up this rare relic of our networking past and turn it into something useful for you, which is pretty slick because it's running like old MIPS stuff. So yeah,
Yep.
this is fun.
But 250 megahertz MIP can still route a gigabit of traffic, I think. So
Sure. And I saw it has the dual NICs on board on the back there, and this particular model has a
sadly,
modem.
they are only 10100 NICs, so I guess you won't be doing a gigabit
Oh,
of traffic. But for your home,
no.
this is probably more than enough.
Sure, for some specific task or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, this is pretty cool. Pretty neat to see an old machine like this repurposed into
Look
something.
at that! The RAM is
network.
on like a PCI card.
What? Okay, I'm looking at the picture now. Let's see here.
Like that actually does look like a PCI slot, doesn't it? Judging by
it does kind
of where the key is.
Yeah, it's like a PCI expander, and then the RAM sockets are on that.
Yeah, that's just weird.
Yeah, that was probably done for space concerns.
Yep.
I imagine.
Little
but
tiny
whatever.
C8 hard drive, Kingston RAM.
Well, the one thing they pointed out, though, this is it does use a very special type of memory. You can't just go buy anything off the shelf. Let me see.
Right. It's
remember what it was? Like it had to be 3.3 volts specifically.
Right. Yes, it was old. A specific kind of layout of older DDR, or like the first one or whatever.
Yeah, it required special 72 EDO SIM running at 3.3 volt. So yeah,
EDO jumping. That's old.
I know, right? But he notes here in the article that as on eBay, as of the time he wrote this, there was a vendor who had a stockpile of these 128 megabyte SIMs for pretty good prices.
Nice.
So you might be able to pick some up if you have access to one of these machines and like to turn it into something interesting.
It is very strange to see a machine using 486 style RAM, but also able to boot off USB.
Right. Another cool thing he noted, though, in the article was don't just throw any, Western Digital 7200 RPM, latest SATA drive in there. He said the exhaust isn't good enough in the system where it could keep that drive cool. So he recommended like a 5400 RPM ATA or whatever.
Well, also, it looks like it only has IDE ports, not SATA ports. So.
Yeah, you'd have to use. You're talking about
an adapter.
Yeah, but still slower drive, so you don't burn that little puppy up. But anyway, yeah, you'll want to go take a look at the pictures there if you guys are interested in that. It's neat to see repurposed old hardware.
Yep, there he's got it set up as his network. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. But 10BASE-T, man, even my internet upstream and downstream way faster than that. I couldn't use that here.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, it does 10-100. The NIC doesn't.
Oh, it does 100.
So yeah, it'd be good enough for your home connection.
Okay, well, there you go. That's not so bad then. Okay, so next up, we have some interesting news about OpenBSD versus AFL. So first of all, Alan, why don't you go ahead and explain the acronym
right,
there.
AFL is the American Fuzzer something.
LOP or whatever, American Fuzzy LOP.
Whatever that's. But basically, a fuzzer is a program where basically for the input of some application, it tries all kinds of different invalid stuff, putting in strange characters, putting in much longer input than is expected, and all kinds of things. Basically, it tries just pounding on the program with different inputs to see what will break. And they found that if you put in nothing in a certain spot, then that can crash the SSH keygen thing, or if you put in a really long string over here, it might overflow a buffer or whatever. And basically, in the never-ending security audit that is OpenBSD, they started running it across lots of different tools, and they basically found a bunch of bugs that they've started to fix now.
Which is really cool. That's a neat utility, which I'm sure we'll see other people start using in the future too. But it tests programs. It tortures them with all sorts of random and invalid input, and in the hope of uncovering some of these bugs which maybe haven't been detected before.
Including they got one here in
well, they fixed some pointer key references in OpenSSH.
Right, Mandoc had some problems, and there was something else too, I think.
TCP dump did as well.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And the other thing is that they point out that the AFL is now available in the OpenBSD, FreeBSD, and NetBSD package systems, whether it's ports or package source or whatever.
Nice.
So you can also try it on your own programs, or start hitting other things with it and find the bugs too. And
definitely, I'd love to see see more and more people doing this. This is an easy way where you don't necessarily have to be a developer, maybe, to run this and see what breaks, and then just file a bug report.
So. Throw random bad input at a program and see what happens.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So yeah, they also mentioned that AFL has an impressive list of different CVEs, vulnerabilities, and programs that it got credit for because it found the problem by fuzzing different stuff.
Okay. Very cool. Well, next up in the news, speaking of ports, we have a new port in the FreeBSD ports tree, which is Gnome 3, which has finally hit.
Yes.
It's been in process for a long time now.
Yes, and you've been stealing the in-process version for your tree, right?
Yeah, we've had it for, gosh, it's been a couple of years now, maybe, or more than a year and a half. In PCBSD for a while, and OpenBSD's had it for a while as well. But it hadn't actually hit the official FreeBSD ports tree proper until just this last week.
Yep.
So, very cool, and congrats, guys. This was a huge project for them to port it over and make this something usable for FreeBSD users. Part of that was due to all the system D dependencies, and of course the upstream developers. I'm sure you recall various posts about them not being interested in non-Linux OSs. So of course that brings some new challenges to the board, and it took a considerable amount of effort for them to port it over. But now that it is in the FreeBSD ports tree, if you run a vanilla FreeBSD box, you can now grab Gnome 3 and all of its goodies. And of course, they brought in Cinnamon 2.2 as well. So if you'd like to play with that, you can. And both those are interesting projects. I'm more of a KDE guy myself, but hey, there's a lot of people who like Gnome. So.
One caveat is that you have to be running FreeBSD 9.3 or newer, which would be 10.1, because I think it relies on some of the kernel and graphics driver changes stuff. And part of the reason it took so long is because they had to basically not just pull up the version of Gnome, but because Gnome kind of has its fingers in everything, there were a lot of separate little ports that had to be updated as well.
I know we've seen where it really likes having full hardware rendering for like video and acceleration and stuff, and so running this on VESA mode, not so pleasant.
Right. And so if you want to switch to it, you should definitely read the updating file in the ports tree, and also in the commit there they have some instructions. You can see there are quite a few conflicting packages you have to delete first and let the newer dependencies get sucked in. It's a little bit of a mess, but once that's sorted out, it should be pretty good. They say they're currently...
IRC is saying, when are we going to have DVD playback? What the heck, man? We've had that for a long time.
Yeah.
Give me that.
I think that's why he was joking. They said they're currently aware of 2 issues. The first is a bug in the file monitoring code in glib 20. The bug causes glib programs to crash when files in a monitored directory are added or removed. Well, that's not very helpful.
Yeah, it's not very pleasant.
They say upstream is aware of the problem, but since the problem is quite complex and there's no solution yet, however, this problem isn't restricted to BSD, so they do expect it to actually get a fix.
Oh, that's good.
And they say the second issue is that on certain video cards, Totem, which is the video player, will display a purple/pink overlay on the video. It is not clear yet what the issue is. I think that's related to the acceleration of the video playback, although I'm not sure. And then they say major thanks to Gustavo Perez, who's been driving the force behind getting Gnome 3 up to speed again, and thanks to the people that ran the exception runs against the ports tree, and also thanks to Joe Maloney, Chris Moore, Beetlebrox, Ryan Lorty, Anton Jukolotut, I can't pronounce these names, but all the other people that helped out to get Gnome 3 actually working.
Yeah, there was a lot of folks who really put some effort into making this happen.
And you were one of them.
I was one of them. I'm not so much on the port side, but we did fix a lot of stuff importing it into PCBSD and fixing port stuff. But I, for one, am glad I don't have to pull that in anymore, and I can just grab it from the main FreeBSD ports tree. So thank you. You guys saved me a lot of time by getting that in now. It does simplify things a lot here. So I am very glad to see that go in. And the glib bug you mentioned, that might explain the Firefox crashes when package NG is running and like doing stuff in user local bin and whatnot. So
I don't know if Firefox monitors a lot of directories.
Yeah, we've seen that where when you add or remove a file in like user local, some certain directories like Firefox just dies.
I wonder if it's like the Firefox plugin directory where you package updating Flash or something.
That is possible. Yeah, I'll have to check. We've gotten random reports of it, so I'm not sure what particular thing was being updated at the time. Just that they were running package updates. So, well, good
hopefully that'll get fixed soon.
Take a look at that.
Like they said, apparently it's a bug in Linux as well. So.
Oh, okay. So it's not just us. Phew. Okay.
It's something in glib itself, not in...
glib 2.0 it says. Very cool. Okay, well, of course, we do want to mention the first sponsor for the show this week, and
Yes.
that is, as usual, TarSnap. And the URL for that, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Please do go there and let them know that we sent you, and go ahead and sign up with an account. It literally costs it's pocket change in
Exactly.
some cases, depending on how much you're backing up. That may last you a stinking long time.
Yes.
But there's no excuse not to do the backups. You guys, every week, I'm sure if you guys are techs, how many times have you had to fix a family member's computer, or the hard drive's gone bad and people lose data, and I didn't do backups, or they're backing up to some little external drive or whatever, and that goes bad. Or, come on, guys, it's 2014.
Even almost every FreeBSD developer I've talked to has at some point lost some bit of code that was really great, and they'd love to have it back. It's like,
yes.
And if they had a backup, but it was a month old, so it was missing all of the useful improvements, and it's just like, you can back up an entire gigabyte for a quarter.
Yeah, it's
can't argue with that.
Guys, again. And with it being fully encrypted, it's not like you got to worry about the security of it on the remote end. It's like, nope, nothing leaves my box. It's not encrypted. And if you don't believe us, go look at the source code yourself, and you can audit it and see if you can find any bugs in it.
And there's a bounty if you do.
It does what it's supposed to. Yeah, there is a bounty if you do, so make some money off that. But again, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Do let them know that we sent you, and we would appreciate that. So we're joined now by Brendan Gregg. Glad to have you with us. We're out at Meet BSD, of course, so having a great time. And first of all, glad to have you on the show this week.
Great, thanks. Good to be here.
So same question we ask everyone. What's your personal history? How did you first get into BSD?
Well, I've been using Unix operating systems for a long time, and I did a lot of work on Solaris and the Solaris family of operating systems. I also did, in terms of BSD specifically, I did some BSD, FreeBSD, when I worked on the dtrace book. And not enough, I wish I did more, but did go into the geom layer and wrote a few new dtrace scripts specifically for that. Of course, previously I've worked on dtrace, and I've also worked on ZFS. And so those technologies are now in FreeBSD, and they're doing great. So in a way, coming to FreeBSD is not so alien. There's many of the creature comforts that I'm used to from the other environment. Coming to FreeBSD recently, I left my previous company and went to Netflix. And Netflix has a massive EC2 Linux cloud, and then a large deployment of FreeBSD physical boxes, which is our OpenConnect appliances. And that's our own CDN. So when you're using Netflix and you use the interface that's being driven by Linux, as soon as you click play on any TV show or movie, that's now being streamed from FreeBSD. And we're now getting over a third of the US internet traffic at night is coming from those FreeBSD boxes.
Nice.
So it's pretty exciting for me to log into these boxes. I mean, they're doing some serious work, and I do performance. So and of course I've got tools like PMCstat and dtrace. So it's a pretty exciting environment to be in.
Oh, very cool. Well, so you talked a lot about benchmarks and performance analysis and whatnot. I think one of my favorite quotes was, benchmarks are wrong just about 100% of the time. So explain that a little bit for our viewers, what you meant.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a depressing thing, but I gave as you said, a talk yesterday, and I think I came up with a nice way to summarize it. And it is benchmarks. People don't have an intuition for benchmark numbers. And so if I said, I benchmarked this system, and my CPU benchmark said it was 8 million Mogofoo-ops. You just don't know what that is, and you can't tell
sounds
whether
right.
Sounds right. I don't know. So people don't have any intuition to start with, and so you're using tools to measure systems, and you have no idea if the tool is working or not. It is extremely error prone, so it's very easy to, by mistake, test the wrong target, or to test something successfully, but it actually has no real-world application. And that happens all the time. And so I've previously had jobs where I was looking after the performance of a product, and the sales team would say, Brennan, we're going to lose the deal if we can't beat the competitor, and the benchmarks have been run, and it shows that we're slow. And so I've done lots and lots and lots of these debugging, forensic debugging of benchmarks. And it got to the point where when sales would come to me with a benchmark, 100% of the time it was wrong. It's like they knew I would overturn every single benchmark, just figuring out. And part of that was I was looking after products I had helped improve the performance of.
Sure.
I can't do this for any product because some products don't perform well.
Right.
But since I'd worked on the performance of the product, I knew the product should beat every single benchmark comparison. And so they would come to me for that. So saying that 100% of benchmarks is wrong is something that comes from experience. It's a real big problem for... it's going to be a big problem for FreeBSD. I'm sure it is already. And what specifically happens is, and I also introduced the benchmark paradox, which is I've said that 100% of benchmarks are wrong. And it's interesting because I was explaining this to a sales guy, and he said, but it's like a coin toss, right? Like it could go either way. And I said, sure, it could go either way. Like people are it's just random. And he said, great. If I have a 50-50 chance of winning, that's great. I'll have great growth. Now, I was really annoyed because the product that he was selling I'd worked on, and the performance was great. Should have been winning over 90% of the deals.
Sure.
But it was, when customers first evaluated it, it was beating less than 10% of the time. And that's the benchmark paradox. Even though it's a coin toss, and it should be 50-50, people are saying the product is only 10% of the time might the product appear to work. And the reason for it, and I described this by saying, so at Netflix we do have this large EC2 cloud. We have a lot of FreeBSD experience. So why don't we start running some FreeBSD in EC2? Because there's AMI instances for FreeBSD that they do PVHVM support, and so performance should be really good. FreeBSD TCP/IP stack is highly performant, and so that's really tempting. But if I or anyone was going to propose doing an operating system switch, and this is the problem that FreeBSD faces, it's not just one benchmark that you have to win, it's probably going to be a few. And so I'm not just going to benchmark network performance, I'm going to benchmark network performance, I might have a couple of file system tests and a CPU test. And if only one of those benchmarks was faster, we're not going to switch. If you want to make a case that it's a good idea to switch operating systems, you're going to want to beat all benchmarks.
Right, sure.
And that's where the paradox comes into play, because if it is a coin toss and you've got, say, 3 benchmarks, then the probability of flipping heads 3 times is 12%.
Yeah.
And so,
because people aren't comparing 2 products that they've never looked at before and benchmark them and pick one. We're using this, we're considering switching to this, and if we're going to switch, it's better win on everything.
Right, that's right. And so the barrier is much higher.
Yeah.
You have to win every single benchmark. So accurate benchmarking is absolutely critical, and so and then I described the solution to this, which was active benchmarking. And with active benchmarking, normally how people run benchmarks is what I call passive benchmarking, where I've downloaded IPERF or FIO, Bonnie, whatever it is, and I run it, and then I go away and get a coffee until it's done, and then I make a slide deck of results and give the slide deck to management. Active benchmarking is where, while the benchmark is running, you log in and you run all the tools to verify that it's doing what it's supposed to do. So if I'm doing a CPU benchmark, log in and run top, and see if the CPUs are doing anything, run PMCstat and look at like cycle counters and cache misses, just see what the CPUs are doing.
Make sure it's not sleeping.
Make sure it's not sleeping, if it's supposed to be a floating point benchmark, like see what's going on there. If I'm doing a disk benchmark, run IOStat. And like
GStat.
right. Run GStat, see what's happening at the geom level, run IOStat down at that level, and like make sure it's sane. It looks okay, and it corresponds with the intent of the benchmark. And if I'm doing networking, go and run SciStat, -ifstat, and verify that stuff as well. Also, go and run dtrace. And so any benchmark where you're hitting up CPUs, do a flame graph where you're profiling the CPUs and look at the flame graph. You can also do latency tracing with dtrace. So you can do this on FreeBSD. There's tons and tons of tools so that what you've got to do is when you go to do these benchmarks, you convince the person running it, and this is what I tell people all the time, is set up the benchmark so it runs basically in a steady state for infinity.
Yeah.
So So I've got 7 days at least where I can log in and I can PMCstat, dtrace, I can run everything, really get to the bottom of it and say, okay, this is what's limiting the benchmark. And then once I've found that, we can see if that makes any sense at all, like compared to the intent of the benchmark.
Yeah.
So
it seems your average benchmark runs for 7 minutes instead of 7
yeah,
minutes.
yeah, and you just you don't have enough time. And like during 7 minutes, it might have like a ramp up and a cool down. And you kind of want it to get into steady state, so you have all the time in the world to go through all the tools and actually do the root cause analysis.
Well, I think one of the interesting, I saw a lightning talk you gave at another conference about specifically sales came to you with the benchmark that was, and said that Amazon was so much faster than yours, and then when you looked into it, it turned out that their benchmark was fine, but when they were analyzing it and making the report, they were missing the K, and so they were off by a factor of 1,000.
That was incredible. And see, I mean, this is a company, and the company exists to benchmark. Like that's their job, that's their function. And they'd made all the typical mistakes. And so they benchmarked the wrong target, like the compile options were wrong, all the usual stuff. And like, people do this. This is why you need to debug the benchmarks and get to the bottom of it. I mean, it was a real problem that these people were seen as professionals, and this is their company. Because when they were giving us reports to say that our product was slow, people who are new to this, like new managers who just joined, were kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
We have this company who's benchmarked our product, and our product's slow. So there's obviously a serious problem we need to jump on. And I mean, right off the bat, I was trying to explain like 100% of benchmarks are wrong. This is going to be wrong. I just haven't found why yet. And spent a month with them going through all of the things that they hadn't set up properly. And a lot of that was normal. But then they went the extra mile, and that was what was surprising was that they'd automated benchmarks like FIO and had shell scripts to read the output. And I don't think they had run FIO. FIO is the file system I/O test. I actually like it because it's got a lot of features and does things. I don't think they had seen an output where the operations per second can have either like 100 or 100K. So we'll actually put a unit at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they were doing was they were just chopping off the units.
Grabbing only the numbers.
Yeah. They just grab the number, whatever's after it, just chop it off. Just chop off the K's and M's and G's and like that. Don't worry about that. And I mean, that was just crazy because I've been looking at these line graphs that had a orders of magnitude difference. And it's like, what can cause this? There must be like caching versus like memory caching versus disk latency. But it was actually, they were just dropping the K. And so like you drop the K and something...
That's literally an order of magnitude.
Yeah, that's 3 orders of magnitude difference. Yeah. And like, when I found that, it's like, oh, wow, this is terrible. This is what they've done wrong.
Spent a month and it was that.
And it was, well, there was a lot of things. I mean, but there's always a lot of things.
Sure.
And then I find this new one, I'm like, wow, this takes the cake. And so I told them that it's like, you need to change this, and like that K is part of the number, like it's important, you need to like calculate it. And they come back with a new benchmark report, and it is still completely bogus.
Right.
And it's still like off by 10x. And it's like, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. And then I'm kicking myself because they had their script that parses it used some like awk and sed and grep. But when I read the bit about like just dropping the K, that's kind of when I lost it and like was sending them emails. I didn't read the rest of it. So I read the rest of it and then realized the next mistake they made, and that was they also didn't deal with decimal points. And so the sed, what it did was a search and replace of decimal points and just deleted them. So this would take 1.6 and make it 16.
Nice.
And so not only they're just dropping the K, they're just eliding decimal points. It was amazing. And so that explained all of the just crazy variation we've been looking at. So
why aren't they looking at that line graph and being like, that's obviously
wrong. I mean,
like, this is your product. You think they would have found that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the graph is crazy. You'd think you'd be a bit embarrassed of like, hey, here's your performance. It's like it moves around like crazy. But
I guess it kind of raises the point you brought up in your presentation that it takes a lot more work to refute a benchmark than to make one.
I mean, I was doing this part-time, but like it went on for a month, and it was a lot of engineering hours. And there's more benchmarks being created than there's engineering time to refute them. And there's also another big problem in the wild, and like we see FreeBSD benchmarked in various places like Phoronix.
Maybe that's stupid Phoronix benchmarks.
but the problem is like, small companies don't have the expertise or manpower to refute benchmarks. Large companies, and I've worked for large companies where, as part of my job, I would refute benchmarks. It still takes a long time, it takes weeks. But then you have the large company bias, where it's like, bad benchmark published, Sun Microsystems looks bad, Sun Microsystem engineer refuted it. And so it's useful that we put in the effort and got to the bottom of these benchmarks, but there's always a cloud over that.
Yeah.
I just don't know. There's no real solution to bad benchmarking. Bad benchmarking is always going to exist. In some ways, there's no prosecution for people who are publishing bad benchmarks. There's no false advertising legislation that's stopping people from doing it. In many ways, the internet is the Wild West, and this is one part of it.
Sure.
Maybe in 50 years, if you want to publish a benchmark, there's some government body you have to register through or something like that. But can you imagine? There's actual repercussions for
we almost
publishing
need
garbage?
a benchmark fact check group or whatever, where they go through and this smells bad.
If you're going to publish a benchmark, we want the raw data to be available as well, so someone can look at it and be like, well, you obviously forgot the decimal point there.
Right, but it still takes a lot of engineering hours to dig through that, and they need to.
But currently, mostly all you get is the final graph. You don't get any insight in how they measured it.
Anytime you get a final graph, just don't bother. That's going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Because my active benchmarking approach means you go and run all these other tools at the same time. And so to give credibility to your this is how you should benchmark properly, is you run it for a long time, you run all the other tools, try to include them in the report, at least mention hey, I ran dtrace, and I ran PMCstat, and I ran IOStat. I ran IOStat because it's a disk benchmark, and I checked that the disks were sane, and here's a snippet of IOStat output during the benchmark. They'll provide a lot more credibility to it. And the other thing is, and this came from a colleague of mine a while ago, he said, every benchmark result should be accompanied with the suspected limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say 1,000 operations per second, next to it you say, I think the CPUs were just saturated. I think that's it. This was 500 operations per second. I think network latency, we can't drive it any further. And it just shows that you've made the effort to understand what the heck is going on.
Right, I guess you said the rule of thumb there is always, when you get a result, ask, why is this result not 10 times bigger?
Yeah, that's another thing, another handy way to help people realize. And it's so simple, but it's something you don't get when you're starting out. And that is, when someone gives you a result, and they give you, I benchmark this system, it's doing 1,000 requests per second. Ask the question, why isn't it 10,000 requests per second? Why isn't it 1,000,000 requests per second? Because that question can be answered, right? And especially on FreeBSD, because FreeBSD has awesome observability tools, you can answer that question. And answering that question is active benchmarking, and that's often going to solve all of the benchmarking woes. So it's a great question to anytime someone sends you a benchmark where they haven't explained the limiting factor,
Sure.
pose the question. It's okay, why isn't it double? Why isn't it 10x? And if they can answer the question, great.
Cool. Well, one thing you said yesterday too, a lot of times you're really more just benchmarking your build tools, your make files. Explain a little bit of that. What do you mean by that?
This is something that's I've seen for the Solaris family of operating systems, and it's something that I haven't done a large refuting of FreeBSD benchmark yet, but I'm sure the time will come, and FreeBSD will suffer this as well. And that is where Linux benchmarking, the make files have been quite optimized for the Linux environment. So if Linux, GCC or Clang with these optimized options, there have been many benchmarks I've seen where if it's Linux, go and use -03 or higher, and if it's other operating systems, go and use -00.
Nice.
And it's so the numbers.
So you're benchmarking GCC, not.
Yeah. You're benchmarking the optimization level, or in some ways, you're just benchmarking the make file. Whoever wrote the make file is I decided to make Linux faster for no reason. And I have seen this a lot. There was one case where it was the Phoronix test suite, where the build on the Solaris family of operating systems would build the binaries 32-bit, where on Linux they'd build them 64-bit. And so you're actually mistakenly testing their framework and not the whole intent is to test the target of the system. And Solaris can build 64-bit, that's no problem.
Sure.
But it's just a fault with the makefile. And I mean, there's lots of this. I did a blog post actually on Unix Bench.
Yep. That's
because,
the one I've seen the makefile.
Oh man, and the makefile has options. I can't remember. It's so ancient options, like from the 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're still using that, and it can make a difference. Like I showed that, like
Sure.
for the very first benchmark it would run, it can be significant.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, every single part needs to be understood. Benchmarking is really hard to do, and the other thing is, like when I was at Sun, it was that you had to get the best people at the company to run the benchmarks, and benchmarking is often considered a lowly activity.
Sure.
It's like you just want someone to turn the crank and get the numbers that management needs. But in reality, you do want to have your top engineers doing this because it is so error prone and it's going to require so much effort.
And especially, like you said, if you're doing active benchmarking, they need to know exactly what to look for and
Right.
how to make a more educated guess as why I think this is the limiting factor.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, active benchmarking, if you're interested in performance in general, doing active benchmarking on FreeBSD is probably the best way you can learn performance analysis, period.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is this. When you start doing performance engineering, and I give you an application to root cause analyze, you really don't know where to start, you don't know what you're looking at, you don't understand a lot of the internals. When you look at a benchmark, at least you know what it's supposed to do.
Sure.
Like it's doing a known workload, and so that environment is much better. FreeBSD has the best observability tools, and so I think if anyone wants to get into performance engineering, doing active benchmarking on FreeBSD would have to be the best way to do it. Is you go and run some of the benchmarks people are using,
Mm-hmm.
you know what the known workload is, so you kind of have this big hint of what it's supposed to be doing, and then you've got lots and lots of really good tools to explain it.
Oh, very cool. Well, any other questions? Or
Did you want to plug your book?
Yes. I have my last two books. I did a dtrace book, which was it used Solaris as the prime example, but it also did Mac OS X and FreeBSD to a lesser extent. And what's useful about the dtrace book, it's over 1,000 pages, isn't so much being able to copy and paste a script and expect it to work. The big problem with dtrace is knowing what to do with it. And what the scripts embody is an idea and a use case. And you can get the dtrace book and just browse it and say, hey, that's useful. I want to run that on FreeBSD 10.
Mm-hmm. And
then the task becomes just porting it. And some of the scripts will just work. Some of them will just require a little bit of changes.
Right.
So I think the dtrace book is... for me, I've done dtrace for so long. Like I know the questions I want answered, and I know the capabilities. But for a lot of people, get a copy of the dtrace book and just browse it to... the hardest thing about performance is most of the things out there are, right now for you, they are unknown unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
Things that you don't know...
That you don't know.
That you don't know.
Sure.
So, and things that are unknown unknowns stay unknown unknowns. Because there's no... You don't know you should be learning them.
You don't know that you're missing it.
You don't know that you're missing it. If you browse a dtrace book, and the scripts are also online on dtracebook.com, you can also browse the dtrace toolkit, things will at least go from unknown unknowns to known unknowns.
Sure.
Because it's like, I can just go up and down the stack and get latency from anything and like do histograms and event logs and do lock analysis. All this stuff that's cool. Now it's a known unknown, and it's much easier because now when the need arises on FreeBSD, you can port the script, you can find someone else to port the script, you can ask me to port the script, and then it can get solved. So
you know the question to ask.
You know the question to ask. And that's the biggest problem. And in my most recent book, I spent a lot of effort on the questions to ask. And I also talked about this briefly yesterday in my Meet BSD talk, which was videoed as well. So, so hopefully the video will be online, which would be really cool. Helping people get to the question to ask point is something I've been documenting with methodologies. And so I went through the use method briefly, but there's lots of methodologies out there. I've been blogging them and I've been putting them on my website, but also did a very big chapter on them in the Systems Performance book, which is my last book. And I think we're at the point where in the world of great, fantastic tools like PMC-Stat and dtrace, we have a plethora of metrics and observability. It's the real problem is how do you start, what steps to take and go to root cause. And so that's why methodologies, I think, are really important.
Yeah, and you mentioned the use methodology, and the one step there is ask why recursively five times.
Yes, that's a great one. I mean, I didn't come up with it. I found out about it from Ben Rockwood, but it's the 5 whys methodology, where if you have a problem, you ask why, and then based on the answer of that, you ask why again, and then you do this 5 times. I mean,
you feel like a 5-year-old, but you get the answer.
Yeah. I mean, like a 5-year-old can tell you this methodology, but like it's just a way to help you work through an issue and like just remind yourself. And especially the thing you have to know about the 5 whys methodology is on FreeBSD we have fantastic observability tools.
Sure.
So these questions can be answered, and so it's not a futile academic exercise to pose these questions. This is something concrete you can do. So it is something useful, and so that was methodologies from yesterday. And today, did they have a video camera in the room? I hope so. I'm giving a talk on flame graphs.
Nice.
And all sorts of different flame graphs that we can do on FreeBSD. And I've been using PMC-Stat quite a lot on FreeBSD to come up with some brand new ones. So I'm really excited. And people should check out that talk. It's some of the newest stuff.
Well, really quick, you want to mention your GitHub repo as well?
I've been putting a lot of this stuff on GitHub. So, like, if you go to github.com/BrettandGreg, there is, for example, the flame graph code. There is the heat map code. So if you have like event logs, you can turn them into heat maps. And then yesterday morning, since I've been creating a bunch of dtrace scripts for the Netflix FreeBSD OCAs, I haven't found a great place to put them yet, but I temporarily just put them on my GitHub, so you can get them. I should be adding to them and like adding documentation and stuff, and so it's good to publish more scripts and more tools.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us this week. This has been fascinating, and can we make you our official benchmark debunker in the future?
Oh man, it's a lot of work, but someone's got to do it. It is really important work.
Well, I'll try not to bug you too often, but if there's something that obviously doesn't pass the smell test, we'll have you shoot it down real quick.
That's right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess 2 episodes ago, we were showing that graph, or the block diagram we had where all the parts of the system and the different tools you can use to monitor them. Because we had someone who's like, I'm for the first time taking over administration of a FreeBSD server, and I don't know how to look at what's happening on it. And that diagram is very useful. I saw you have an even newer version that added IPMI tool and a bunch of other stuff to it.
Yes, and I stuck it on SlideShare, so people are welcome to get it, print it out, stick it on their office wall, use it in other talks. If you're giving a FreeBSD talk, just borrow it, stick it in there.
We almost need to get that in the handbook somewhere. Just you know, if you're doing diagnostics of FreeBSD performance, here's a handy reference. You know? And
I came up with another good one, which is brand new, where I stared at Intel manuals until I kind of. Because Intel manuals are great because they're really detailed, but I just wanted the most sensible higher level internal diagram of a CPU, and so I did this yesterday, and I put it in my talk where I had the block level of showing the caches, the instruction decoder, the buffer, the micro op cache, and then I decorated it with all the FreeBSD PMC-Stat instrumentation sources. So that's another really cool picture. So the other picture is all like the stat tools and tracing, and this picture is about hardware, CPU internals. So.
Oh, very cool. Well, again, thank you so much for being with us, and hope you guys enjoyed the interview.
We're back, getting ready to head into the news roundup for the week. But of course, before we do, we want to mention the other sponsor, which as usual is IX Systems. And they have a couple cool new articles they've sent us this week. And looks like a couple conferences they were at.
Yes.
So what's the first one you got here,
The first one was LISA, which is the Large Systems Administrative Conference. And
in Seattle, Washington, by the way.
So IX had 3 people there helping man the FreeBSD booth and having the TrueNAS and FreeNAS booth there as well. And I guess they were promoting PCBSD as well, because that's always a big draw for people. They say, David says, having never attended a LISA conference, I was uncertain of what to expect. Of course, there are the normal booth duties from setup and teardown and long hours of standing and talking, skipping meals and things like that. He said, this year, IX and the FreeBSD booth were right next to each other, which was convenient because attendees were able to learn about FreeBSD and then immediately about FreeBSD-based products and FreeBSD hardware and so on. We sent a box of our trademark demon horns and other free swag to the booths, and obviously those are always popular at the conferences.
Yes, you see a lot of people running around at them. Usually people ask, where did you get those? And a lot of times they're out of them.
Yeah.
First thing in the morning, like we run out pretty quick.
Yep. They've started to catch on. IX tries to bring a very big pile of them now. So the FreeBSD booth was staffed by Drew Levine, who works at IX, but also is on the FreeBSD Foundation. Deb Goodkin and Ann Dickinson, which both work for the FreeBSD Foundation. I said on the first day, all 3 staff members were needed to keep up with all the traffic and the questions about FreeBSD, ZFS, the new features of FreeBSD 10.1. By the end of the conference, the booth raised $610 for the FreeBSD Foundation.
Nice.
Because, as we mentioned the other week, it's important for all the nonprofits there to get a large number of donations from different people. So even if you're only donating $5 or $10, by doing it that many separate people, it actually is just as valuable to the foundation.
That's important for like the tax status here in America,
exactly.
like 501c3.
Getting $610 split up from $10 at a time from 61 different people is more valuable than getting $61,000 from one business. It's not that we don't want the money too, but it's the number of people that matters as well. Because it's not just for the tax status. When companies are looking, it's like, well, how strong is the FreeBSD community? It's like, well, look at all these individual people that support it as well.
We're not a foundation of one company.
Exactly.
There's many players in this industry that are using BSD in a lot of interesting ways.
Yes, and over at the IX booth, Marty and David were working together to explain the benefits of FreeNAS and TrueNAS and the ZFS file system in general, and showing off the new TrueNAS system that's all SSDs, as well as the little FreeNAS Mini, which is great for more home user type things or small office type things.
Nice.
And it said, in addition, several people that are already customers of IX stopped by and said hello, which is great. Was very pleased and surprised to meet many of our current customers, including one of our most influential customers from MIT, who's been referring me around campus. They said the event drew 1,100 attendees from all kinds of different parts of the IT world. Attendees made up very diverse demographics, representing a wide range of countries, industries, and ages. The IX booth in particular drew a steady stream of curious sysadmins that started coming by before the booth opened and didn't stop until they were, even while they were still tearing down. So they before they were set up and while they were still tearing down, they were still getting people.
Yeah, that's a definitely busy conference.
Yeah, so they said that supercomputing went very well.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I hope you guys enjoyed the
Lisa
pictures
went
there.
very well. Then they went to supercomputing.
Yeah, the supercomputing right after.
Yep.
This was out in New Orleans, it looks like.
Yeah, it started on Monday, I think. Sorry, just who wrote this one?
Ben did. Ben
right.
Millman.
Yes, so he arrived late on Monday for the conference, and just time to see the official opening of the show. And they had apparently a really nice party there. There were mini bars spread all over the show floor, and a marching band going up and down the aisles.
Good way to let people enjoy the conference.
Over at the IX booth, they had the an eye-catching video running on the TV and lots of FreeBSD demon horns to give out. And they got quite a few visitors, and they had the FreeNAS minis with the read and write caches to show off ZFS can achieve even in your tiny little home version by just sticking an SSD in there. And then they had the TrueNAS demo with all the SSDs to show what you can do if you really scale it up.
Sure.
And he says, as always, the horns were very popular.
Oh, that is very cool. And you guys know we've talked about IX a lot. So IX Systems is out there doing a lot of good stuff for, not just FreeBSD, but also the BSDs in general. And, they are open source experts. And so when you contact them, they can build anything custom from those small FreeNAS minis you might see in the pictures to their bigger TrueNAS boxes with all kinds of bells and whistles. And of course, they can do everything in between. And when you talk to these guys, they're going to go ahead and set you up with the best solution for your particular problem, not just whatever happens to be on the shelf at that moment. So definitely you want to talk to these guys, talking to the sales guys or talking to engineers. They understand the problems you're trying to solve and will help you come up with solutions to solve those specific issues.
Yeah, like most of them were actually sysadmins or hardware guys before they got into the sales rather than, just your regular sales drone.
Sure. So, of course, we want to mention the URL, which is ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Do go there. Let them know that we sent you. We would appreciate that. And they love hearing the feedback from our listeners as well. So that's always fun to do. Okay, well, let's move right into the news roundup for the week. So we got a release this week. Looks like Dragonfly BSD 4.0 has landed.
And actually, 4.0.1 has already been released as of yesterday.
Oh, okay.
They had a couple of minor fixes there.
But still, it's good to see that they were able to do a quick turnaround like that. So this version has some cool notables, including support for Haswell GPUs, which I'm jealous of.
Exactly.
Good job, guys.
FreeBSD doesn't have that yet, so let's make that happen. Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. Let's make this happen.
I was told it was a couple of weeks away, like 2 months ago. So
yeah, it's always been on the verge, but it's coming. It's coming.
Yep.
They've got lots of SMP improvements, including some in PF, and they've upped their support to 256 CPUs.
Yeah, so they're caught up to FreeBSD there, although FreeBSD is vaulting ahead to 1024 CPUs because I complained at MeetBSD.
Yeah. Well, it's time.
Yes. Well, by time 11 comes out, which will be the end of next year, or probably the beginning of 2016,
you're going to start seeing systems with 200.
Being able going over 256 will already be possible, and then it has to work for 5 years after that. So going to 1024 definitely is going to be a requirement.
Also, interestingly enough, they have become one of the other first BSDs to drop support for i386. Yep. So it now joins PCBSD in the 64-bit only club. And come on in, guys. The water is warm. Yep. It's not as scary as you think to drop the i386 stuff.
Even Red Hat Enterprise Linux did it, so it can't be that.
Yeah. It's time. I think the hardware now, you're talking 11, 12 years of hardware.
Right.
So.
Well, now Intel's coming out with new i386 stuff, but it's embedded, and that's not really the market for PCBSD or Dragonfly. Dragonfly is people think FreeBSD is targeted only at servers, but Dragonfly is much more in that kind of clustered server big install, whereas FreeBSD also tries to actually hit embedded as well.
Sure, it does. But so that was neat to see that they're doing that. Of course, we'll have the link here to the release notes for all the details, including some networking and kernel improvements and some crypto changes they've made. So congratulations on the release, guys. That's fantastic. We love hearing about new BSD major releases like that dropping.
They made some interesting changes when get PID, set proc title, or clock get time are called more than 10 times. They do some magic to make those be able to read directly from memory, reducing considerably the overhead of those specific system calls. They say get time of day is still implemented as a traditional system call in order to provide more precise temporal values. Performance-wise, it is less important to use clock get time instead of get time when you want get time of day when you want the performance improvement.
Okay.
But those I know the set proc title one I think was one of the problems, or one of the things that was causing performance problems in Postgres. Because I think it updated the process title very often, and that was a very costly operation, and it was actually slowing it down. And so basically for some of these, they've said, when this is happening a lot, let's optimize it.
Cool. And speaking of the crypto stuff, it looks like they added cha-cha algorithms specifically for their random number generator. So
so that would be the update to ARC4 random.
So very cool.
Actually use cha-cha.
Yep.
Plus they ship GCC 474 and lots of other interesting bits.
So are they planning on staying on GCC, or are they looking at
they had looked at Clang a little bit, but they've decided that for their uses, the GPL v3 doesn't hurt them so much. So they just
doesn't bother. Okay. Oh, I was just curious.
Because I guess most, unlike FreeBSD, nobody's really making an appliance out of Dragonfly, right? It's all about clustering and performance, and so it made more sense for them to just, stick
with GCC, which works. Okay. Oh, that is very cool. Okay.
Well, and they updated their libfetch and fetch utility to be in line with FreeBSD, so it has all the SSL stuff.
Oh, nice. Okay. They've synced that back up.
Yep.
Okay, well, speaking of some FreeBSD stuff, we had an interesting Hacker News thread about, can we talk about FreeBSD versus Linux? Yes. And it's actually a good forum, or a good thread where the trolls kind of stayed away, and we got some real good discussions happening.
And I was somewhat surprised, although I shouldn't have been, by some of the questions. It seems, a lot of people's opinion of BSD is based on like FreeBSD 5 and 6 a long time ago, or something they heard that has since changed a lot. since then.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Like
yeah.
there was some people that didn't think it was possible to boot root on ZFS, which has been possible since FreeBSD 7.3 when ZFS became a major thing. And you know, it wasn't that easy back then, but it's certainly improved now.
It was doable.
And you know, the guy in particular finds that article on Over Yonder, the one from like 2000, it's at least 10 years ago, about the differences. And while a lot of that stuff's still true, you know, it's obviously a 10-year-old article.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I must say this was helpful. I saw somebody was talking about a bug in Firefox here on FreeBSD, which hits PCBSD as well, and I patched it just based on the comment here in this thread. So that was very helpful. I'm not sure who it was who made the comment, but shoot, when you guys find stuff like that, send it in.
Exactly.
We'll fix it. I am more than happy to include those fixes. I have to know about them ahead of time.
Yeah, so someone posted about the problem, and then Ted Unangst from OpenBSD said the Firefox issue is actually a problem with GTK because it sends the image to the X server and then reads it back from the X server in tiny chunks, causing a lot of system calls. And you can fix it by recompiling X with larger socket buffers, and there's also a environment variable you can adjust to change how Firefox tries to do the optimization of large images.
So yeah, we just set that on ours. So going forward, we'll have that on PCBSD for those who do very large image downloads. I hadn't run into it, I guess, in the past. But yeah, good to know. So if you guys find stuff like that, send it in to us. We are more than happy to include it. Okay.
But I guess the biggest thing here with this forum post here is that, you know, they specifically even in the original post, steered away from asking which is better or whatever, and just asked, you know, what are the differences? And there were a lot of kind of side discussions. You know, Plan 9 always manages to find a way into the conversation, you know, talking about content addressable storage. But there were quite a few people who had questions about ZFS and didn't necessarily understand how ZFS works. Or, you know, there are people that, like we said, weren't aware that you could boot FreeBSD off ZFS, which you've been able to do since like 2008. And people asking about, you know, and then there was a comparison with ButterFS, and they asked about CP -reflink, which is copying a large file, but doing it kind of as a clone instead of having to read and write all of the data. And it's like, well, they were just talking about that at the OpenZFS Dev Summit, so maybe we'll have something like that eventually. And there's lots of other questions and things people asked. You know, I think the point we were talking about the other week came up of, you know, oh, ZFS uses all your memory. It's like, well, you can tune that, you know, and decide how much you want it to have.
Yeah, most of these things are easily, you know, just the small tweaks and stuff to fix to suit your particular needs.
But yeah, there are just a lot of people that just don't know about the latest and greatest in FreeBSD or any of the BSDs. You know, the OpenBSD guys were in full force being like, yeah, you know, OpenBSD, especially if you're a desktop user, makes a lot of sense because it's all about cutting edge. Don't worry about backwards compatibility. Let's just make everything work right away.
Just the latest hardware. And,
and you know, FreeBSD sometimes is kind of held back by the fact it's like, well, we have to not break version 10.0 because that's still supported. And, you know, as a sysadmin, I like the fact that, you know, I can set up a system and know that it'll be supported at least until this date, and I won't have to upgrade every so often. Or when I do a minor upgrade, it's not going to break everything.
Sure.
But as a desktop user, that's usually not what you're looking for.
No, you just want something that you can throw on your latest box you just got.
Yep. But yeah, there's
cool. Somebody in the comments did mention us as well about BSDnow.tv being a good resource to learn. So thank you for posting that as well. That.
There's quite a bit of text in here.
It's a long thread. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going back and forth.
Especially considering that it's only 4 days old, so I'm sure it'll get bigger.
Yeah, maybe as a result of highlighting it here, some of you guys will hop on and throw your 2 cents in too. Cool. Okay, well, let's move on. Next up, OpenBSD IPSec Tunnel Guide.
Yes.
Oh, this looks pretty interesting. I'll let you explain this one,
Yeah, so
Alan.
this is explaining how to set up a site-to-site IPSec tunnel, or basically a VPN, by having OpenBSD gateways at either location, and basically being able to bridge your 2 LANs as if there were one. Throughout this document, there are example configs shown, some of which contain secret key data. Do not use the example keys, right? Make your own. Otherwise, people have your secret keys, and that's not very useful.
If this is a test, that's an automatic fail. So do not do that.
But they mentioned the tools that ship with OpenBSD. right? You don't have to do a kernel recompile or install any other software. Everything you need to do IPsec tunneling is built into the base system.
Nice.
So
Yeah,
they
that'll
have the
definitely make it easy.
ISAKMPD, which is your Internet Security Association key management protocol. So this is the one that's responsible for exchanging cryptographic keys and setting up the security associations between your peers. Your IPsec control, your IPsec.conf, SASyncD, which is a security association synchronization daemon, allows you to set up, if you have redundant gateways, then you have to sync your security association so that if one of the two routers goes down, the other one can pick it up and already has the keys. So that allows you to share the keys, the temporal keys between your two routers in a redundant setup. Kind of like, you have pfSync to sync your state tables between your two routers so that if one goes down, it already knows about the NAT translations the other one did. Same thing, but for your IPsec tunnels.
Nice.
And they actually just do a good job of explaining all of the terminology and acronyms that come into trying to read regular documentation about your IPsec tunnels, like what is a security association and what is transport mode versus tunnel mode and so on and so on. And so they show here building a site-to-site tunnel. You can see they have their network on one side, going into the OpenBSD gateway, and then across the internet to the other OpenBSD gateway, and then back into the other network.
Okay. Well, very cool. Yeah, that's definitely a helpful guide if you've looked at wanting to do this before. And having an OpenBSD, having everything built into the base just is really sticking helpful. So, yeah, that's really cool, guys. Okay, well, next up, we have some more Dragonfly news this week. I guess they've started a project to work on IPFW2.
Yes.
So this is very cool. So for those who don't know, Dragonfly, much like FreeBSD, comes with more than one firewall you can use. But it looks like now you're going to have another choice, as someone is working on a fork of IPFW, which is actually already in its second version. So I suppose this is IPFW3, but we'll let that one slide for now. But not a whole lot is known yet, but it's still in heavy development. We have a brief roadmap, which we have a link to the page here with some of the planned additions. And the guy who's working on this has already agreed to come on the show for an interview.
Awesome.
So keep an eye out for that in the future.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him about, because IPFW2 was introduced in FreeBSD in 2000 and something. Luigi Rizzo did it, and it's responsible. I guess it came with FreeBSD 5, I think, and it had quite a few speed enhancements and stuff. And I think it's when they introduced tables and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah,
sure. But we're gonna, of course, give him a little chance to get some more work done on it first before he wants to come talk about it.
That's the interesting thing, because Dragonfly forked at the end of 4, they wouldn't have seen IPFW2 being in FreeBSD 5.
So this is 2 for them.
Yeah, but yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Still, though, it's exciting. I'm personally a fan of IPFW, so I'm excited to see them working on that. So, and it sounds like it's going to be very modular, some of the design goals as well. So very cool. Keep up the good work, and expect that interview sometime next year once he's had a chance to make some more progress, and we will, of course, keep you up to date with any new developments in that front. We're back, guys. It's time for some feedback now from you guys out in the audience, and we're going to start this week with Michael, who's asking about snapshots and ports. So he says, hey, I have 2 questions. I'm using FreeNAS. How can I delete all ZFS snapshots that have used 0 space?
Okay, so for that one, it's kind of interesting. There's a couple of different things. So there's a property on each snapshot called written that is how much data is actually in that snapshot. And so you could use that. So when you're doing like ZFS list, right, if you do ZFS list -T for type snapshot, and then -O allows you to pick the columns that'll show up. If you just say name, comma, used, comma, refer, comma, written, it'll show you those different columns on the snapshots. And you can see, most of them, the used on a snapshot will be, 1K or something tiny. And then the refer is how much data that snapshot contains, but isn't how much of it is unique to that snapshot. That's where the written property comes in. And I'm looking at some snapshots of like the PCBSD package repo, and most of them contain no new data, but there's one that has 164 megs of new data. And when you compare, the preferred size is the same on all of them because nothing really changed.
Sure.
And so you can use that written column and use that to decide which ones are empty and then decide to delete them. So you could write a shell script that just does the named column and the written column, and then if the written column happens to be 0, then you can delete the data or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, so you just have to parse it out.
So you can actually
okay, all these, then write a small shell loop that says, okay, let's remove any of these that are less than the size.
ZFS is great for scripting. It has a flag. I forget what the flag
dash capital H for scripting mode. I think,
yeah. That if you put in any of the ZFS commands, instead of making it nice and human readable, it makes it script readable. So it's a fixed delimiter for everything, and it strips off the headers and everything. So instead of trying to make it line up nice for a human, it makes it easy for a script. And that does much great stuff. And so then you can just literally grep the output for lines that end in 0 or 1K or whatever the marker for a one you want to delete is, and then for each over those with an awk or whatever. The other interesting feature that isn't documented that well, I guess, is that you can delete a range of snapshots. So if you do ZFS destroy dataset at snapshot 1, then put the %, and then put a snapshot that occurs like 8 snapshots later, and it'll delete everything from the first one to the second one inclusive. So everything in that range. You can also do, if you do ZFS destroy and then do -n, it will not actually do it, just list out what it would have done. And if you include V in that, it will also tell you how much space you will regain by deleting that series of snapshots.
Nice.
So I guess he's asking probably because he's got a lot of snapshots and they're cluttering up his display, where not that he is running out of space, because those snapshots only use 1 kilobyte of metadata, and that's
a couple bytes here and there,
but yeah, you can definitely write a script to do that. Or I guess he's on a FreeNAS.
In FreeNAS, you could do it in the shell prompt there, most likely.
Does FreeNAS not have let you tune the how often you keep the snapshots?
No, it lets you set those tunings and stuff, but maybe he's got his set to do thousands of them.
Right,
now he wants to go through and prune them.
For example, on the PCBSD repo, I have one every 15 minutes, and that would add up to a lot if I didn't say, after they're a day old, only keep the top of each hour. And after they're 2 days old, I only need every 12 hours.
I'll have to check and see how FreeNAS does that. That's how our utility does it in PCBSD as well, where you can do keep only,
or whatever.
Keep 24 hours worth of 1 hour snapshots, and then a day's worth, and then one a week and one a month or something like that. There's different ways to set that.
And then it'll prune them for you, so you don't have to do this. But yes,
it does the auto pruning.
It'd be very easy to write a little script to prune those ones as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's something you could probably even ask in the FreeNAS forums. If they don't have a way to do it via the GUI, I'm sure somebody could send you a quick, run this shell command to find all your ones that have 0 space, and then this to delete them. So it's not super hard. But the second part of his question he asks is that we've talked about the BSD ports tree and how they need help. He said, well, I am far from helping, but where can I start? He said, where can I learn how to create a port? IF1 used SyncThing, and for a while it was stuck on version 0.8.9, and they finally upgraded it. But I want to learn how to port the newer versions. I no longer want to be at the mercy of someone else.
Yep,
which is
that's probably how I got into the start port tree. Yep,
that's exactly it. There's something you use, and you're like, oh, it's old. I want the new one.
It was
go learn how to do it.
My very first one was Bacula, and I wanted the newer version, and so I tried to do the port because I think Dan was on vacation or something. So that was the first time I interacted with Dan without actually realizing it was the guy who wrote the FreeBSD.
I honestly
what was his
remember
website? FreeBSD something.
Wait, who's
Dan's old site that had all the help for new BSD?
The diary?
Yes, FreeBSD Diary. That's it. I didn't realize it was the same guy, but or that he ran BSDCam. But and then my first port was actually a program that wasn't in the port tree, and I wanted it there. And then the next thing was like, oh, this port's out of date, so I'm gonna So there is what's called the Porter's Handbook. It's in the FreeBSD documentation, and it starts off very easy. Whether that's making your first port or just doing a minor version bump. Sometimes it's literally just saying, well, here's
a
the name of
couple
the new
lines.
file to download, and then I'll update the package list, and there it goes. And then it covers all the complicated stuff like adding new options to the port config thing, and
how to patch the ports and fix things that don't work natively.
Yeah, the port tree has lots of magic that does a lot of the work for you, but it also covers the slow porting if you actually have to write patches for the program, although that's not very frequent that you have to do that.
Well, it depends on what you're working on. It seems like I'm doing that all the time.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool. So definitely Porter's Handbook. But to get started, go find something like SyncThing, something you use that maybe is out of date, and just see what it takes to upgrade to the new version. A lot of times it is just a couple tweaks in the make file, change the version, run make some to get the new dist files, and then run make stage and check plist to see what new files installed by this and fix those. So I mean, sometimes it can take just minutes to do an update.
And then you can. It tells you how to make up a patch and send it into Bugzilla and get someone to put it in the tree for you.
Take a look and commit it. Yeah.
And if you keep bugging people with that, then you'll get access to do it yourself.
Yeah. Eventually you get stricken with a ports commit bit. So sorry.
We warned you.
Yep. Okay. Well, next up, let's see. Samuel, looks like I am putting FreeBSD on an AMD Dell Inspiron laptop. I want to use embassy grade encryption, I think. My intention is to have one password to wipe and one password to encrypt the hard drive. Any pointers to tutorials? So we talked about this a little before.
Yeah.
We're not aware of Jelly having any functionality like this.
Yeah, there isn't really a way that I know of with either the two options for full disk encryption on FreeBSD to do that. Now, GDBE, the older one, does have an option where you can wipe the contents. I'm not sure. I think you have to actually do a command after you you boot the machine, log in, and then do a command, and that destroys the key. And then the difference with that one, what makes it embassy grade, is that then when the bad guys overrun the embassy and they have a gun to your head, and they demand to know the password, you can give them the real password. They'll type it in. It says, that is the right password. Sorry, this data has been destroyed. Instead of saying that's not the right password or something. And then, that way there's some hope they won't shoot you.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that.
This is a neat feature. Personally, I'd like to see that in Jelly.
Where was I reading just the other day about somebody actually? Oh no, that was something else. Okay. There was one full disk encryption system called Rubber Hose or something like that, specifically designed to help you there, but I don't think it ever went very far. Yeah, a separate password to erase it. That's not a feature that exists currently.
I mean, there's ways you could do it with scripts and stuff at login, ask for another password, and then do some stuff if the wrong one's given. But that's there's ways around that. That's not quite the same.
Well,
thing.
In general, what you would end up doing is not decrypting the file system, not mounting it, dealing with just what you have on your unencrypted root partition if you have one. Like on FreeBSD, which you wouldn't have on PCBSD now because they can manage to do that without it. If you had like a /rescue on there that you could get a basic shell, then you could, overwrite the hard drive with zeros or something
do some damage to it. Yeah.
If you added an extra menu option during the boot to say, destroy this computer, enter the right password to allow that so that somebody can't do it to you for laughs, and have it just write dev random over the drive or dev 0 or whatever.
Okay. Well, if we hear about this, popping up as a feature at some point, I'm sure we will mention it on the show.
I'm just
maybe
picturing
this will inspire somebody to go.
Well, in particular, I'm picturing one of the fairly serious FreeBSD security people who has lots of work to do, getting distracted and be like, "Oh, we definitely need that. I'm going to go build that." I'm like, "It's not that important."
I think it'd be neat to have.
But it's not something I'm going to use.
Sure, on my laptop.
Yeah. I guess I wouldn't be so afraid of destroying my laptop because it's all backed up to TarSnap.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Steven, who actually has a little bit of criticism this week. So he says, "Hey, I've been watching the show for about 6 months, but I'm going to stop now. Every episode is a constant FreeBSD bias, and it's not interesting to me. The newest episode spent over 30 minutes on a single FreeBSD story, and the other BSDs got less than 1 minute."
Well, sorry, that story was the culmination of 9 months of work by 400 and some odd people.
Yeah.
But,
And we did go through everything. So
well, not
yeah,
everything. We
could spend
did,
a
but
lo-
yes,
a lot of it. Yeah.
we tend to get sucked in by all lists. We've definitely
So-
gone too far on an OpenBSD list before as well. But yes,
So we will try and curtail our
Yeah.
enthusiasm a little bit there. But he said you skip right over the Open and NetBSD stuff and even interrupt their stories with the unrelated FreeBSD stuff. It's unfair that you call your show BSD Now and not FreeBSD Now with tiny talks about other BSDs. Maybe you should find a host who is neutral and willing to learn about the others' good points. So, well, first of all, no host is going to stay neutral for long because as soon as they start running one, they're going to like it
Yes.
and stick with it, and that's going to be their BSD of
Well,
choice.
in
and it's
fact,
just
the
natural.
producer that helps write the show originally was a FreeBSD person and is now turned
Mhm.
into an OpenBSD person.
Correct. And people jump and change
Yes.
and stuff. And, hey, to be fair, this week, I think we spent an awful lot of time talking about Dragonfly
Yes.
even and NetBSD and I think more free.
But yes,
we had more other BSD than FreeBSD.
yes.
this week.
Well, I wouldn't say that we interrupt an OpenBSD story, but yes, when they mention something, it makes me think of something in FreeBSD because
That
that's
we used to.
where I spend all of my time. It's not that
Correct.
I'm doing it
So-
on purpose. It's just
We're not trying to
the-
be jerks to
yeah.
convert any of you guys to our particular BSD.
just
It's
any
just when
BSD
we
will
have
do.
personal
Just stop using
stories
Linux.
to tell. That's yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, he said sometimes we say to Linux guys, Linux isn't the only OS when they act like it is a Linux world and BSD is no competition. He hates to see free BSD users doing the same behavior. Well,
I think all
we'll
the
take your
BSDs
criticism with
kind of do that, but
a little grain of salt in the sense that we do try and embrace all the BSDs. And look at our guest list that we've had on with interviews and stuff, and it's a lot of non-free BSD people. So anyway, yeah. But
including
we'll
this
try and be
week.
sensitive of that.
Well, I
It's
guess Brendan wasn't the FreeBSD person, but now he's taken to it with
Sure.
quite a zealousness. So that's good.
yeah, because he's working at
Yeah.
Netflix.
He's
But,
very much
but
likes
yeah.
FreeBSD, which makes me happy.
But no. We'll try and give a fair shake. And if you guys think we're being a little too heavy on FreeBSD and hey, we can do this on another BSD better or whatever, fine. Write us. Let us
Yes,
know.
and I
so
guess
we can put that on the show.
Dan makes a good point because I'm sure he's been faced with this exact problem before. He says you can't expect
Mhm.
equal time for each BSD if there's more or less news about each of the particular BSDs.
That is true.
In particular, NetBSD realizes that they're bad at promoting themselves, and they oftentimes don't really do the blog post or whatever that's going to catch the attention.
Mhm.
And I know Dan's probably had this, and everyone that runs a conference has deal with. It's like, well, there's lots of these big interesting papers for FreeBSD, and we have to like go and poke the NetBSD people and drag them out from underneath
yeah,
a
like,
rock
are you
to
gonna
get
do
them
it?
to give a talk.
Sure. And our producer TJ, I can't give him
Yes.
enough props. He does a ton of work going through commit logs and trying to keep up with all the
Yep.
BSDs. So we
And
can,
also just
give a fair
dragging
shake.
people out from under rocks to get them on the show too.
Yeah, we've had to do that. But no. It's like, so yeah, if you feel like we have a FreeBSD bias, well, again, we both run FreeBSD. And again, nobody's going to be 100% neutral because at the end of the day, you're going to end up using something more than you use others. And that's going to be the one you talk
Yep.
about the most because that's the one you're the most familiar
And
with.
it's the one
So,
where I'm familiar with the most people, and they give me information as well. It didn't quite
Mhm.
make it for this week, but I think next week we'll have some interesting news from Colin Percival about the EC2 stuff that he's been doing. And there's
Sure.
also another FreeBSD sub-project doing some interesting things that we'll hopefully be able to talk about. People are always asking, I'm not a developer or I'm a very new developer. How can I help? Well, we're working on this thing called Junior Jobs, which is a bunch of smaller tasks
Sure.
that just need somebody to spend the time on them. And because they're so small, a lot of the bigger developers just don't want to set aside the time to do it. And it'd be a great
Mhm.
place for someone to get started and earn their commitment. Or just learn their way
Definitely,
around.
definitely. Well, we got to give props to the OpenBSD guys. Though. They've been pretty good about getting in
Yes.
touch with us and getting on the show and sending in stuff.
Yes.
So we
Well,
have
we-
extra info.
I met a couple of them, like Henning and Peter
Mm-hmm.
Hessler, at various BSD conferences, and they've been doing a good job of actually going out and prodding people. Like Peter's actually gone to people and be like, no, you're going to go do an interview now.
And you got to remember, we get a lot of our stuff from BSD conferences, and the OpenBSD guys have had a growing
Yes,
crowd. at
we would
BSD
actually got
conferences that I've
more of
seen in
them
the last couple
at
years.
EuroBSDCon, except for they were all giving their talks while we were recording interviews. So the one guy was like, "Sorry, I just finished talking for an hour. I don't want to go sit and talk, but I'll try to catch you later, and it didn't work out. But
sure.
But yes.
But anyway, we'll try and keep it somewhat neutral. Remember, we do have one FreeBSD person, TJ, our producer, who writes these notes.
Yeah.
So
sorry if sometimes we say more than what he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll try and tone down that enthusiasm a little bit. But yeah. Anyway, we'll try and give all the BSDs a fair shake because we like all the BSDs. And shoot, we're sharing a lot of the same stuff with all the BSDs. So, what benefits one often the others. Okay, let's go move on, I guess, to Remy and OpenStack update.
Sure.
You want to read this one, Alan?
So he's saying he's just released a new version of his guide for building an OpenStack cloud image for FreeBSD 10.1. So if you're using OpenStack somewhere and you want to run FreeBSD on your OpenStack, he has kind of a tutorial that goes through what you have to do to make an image that's ready to deploy on OpenStack. His previous guide was for 10.0 and was quite short and more of a collection of notes and commands. This version is much more comprehensive and has explanations of the various parts and why you're doing it and stuff. He says he's also got a pull request merged into BSD's cloud init, which I think Colin wrote, which lets him extend this even more. You can give a cloud init config file during install with, for example, custom plugins or usernames other than the default FreeBSD users. And if you have the username root, you can set the password on first boot, but right after that, you can scramble it or whatever. Therefore, you could only log in with an SSH key, not with a password. I know SSH keys are better. Sadly, they have to support some users who think otherwise on his internal test machines and so on. But he made a one-line change and got it merged. So he says, now that 10.1 is out, I can get back to working on his native IPSec VPN tutorial, which we just saw one for OpenBSD.
Nice.
It'll be great to have one for FreeBSD as well. He'd like to do one for 10.0, but because of bugs in Raccoon and a specific roadwire config that didn't work, he said he emailed about that a couple weeks ago, and it did work when you changed to either using 10 stable or the beta of 10.1, so that's been fixed.
Yeah.
So he's going to update his tutorial for 10.1 and have all that goodness in there as well. So we look forward to seeing that tutorial, and check out the show notes for the link to his tutorial on creating OpenStack images. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Remy. That's pretty neat. We'll definitely point people over to that, which we just did. Okay, and our last comment for the week from Michael, and it's about a Chromebook follow-up. He said, hey guys, I watched episode 64 earlier today, and I saw Steven's question about the patches for the Acer Chromebook. What was that, the C720, I guess. He said, originally I wanted to wait until Haswell support is there before publishing anything. At EuroBSDCon, it sounded like this was only 1 or 2 weeks away.
That's what I was told,
which is what
too.
we heard, too. Yeah, and we even said that on the air, because that's what we were told.
It's like, it'll be done in time for 10.1, don't worry. It's like, whoops.
Yeah. Well,
nothing is ever done in time, but anyway.
Right? So he says he took the time tonight and created diffs and wrote up everything he could remember on how he got this up and running back in September. And we have the link here to his blog, it looks like, where he posted this. And he told me, EuroBSDCon, Alan, that Peter Hessler might have details on how to make suspend work. I got in touch with him via email, but he stopped responding after one mail. Not sure if he knows or not. In general, I hope that Haswell support might fix this for free anyway. So cool. So I forget who it was who wrote in last week, but
Steven.
I guess it was Steven. So Steven, there you go. The guy who wrote some of the patches and stuff now has the link to the blog post. Go ahead and take a look.
Details what he had to do to get it working so that you can apply those patches. And I think Peter's in the middle of moving again or something. But I'm sure somebody else at OpenBSD knows the answer as well. But we'll see if we can't prod somebody into mailing you back there, Michael.
Okay, well, very cool. I'm looking at the blog post. There's a lot of good details here. So take a look at that. See if you can get FreeBSD up on your 720. Okay, well, that's the end of our questions for the week. And no mailing list gold this week as well.
So about that, hey, people, send in your mailing list gold so that we can have a mailing list gold segment.
Yeah. Sure. So we, of course, want to remind you that all the tutorials will be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv, so go take a look at those. Also, Michael Lucas, who's been on the show several times, and we've talked to him a bunch. FreeBSD Mastery Storage Essentials is now on sale, so check it out if you want to learn about FreeBSD.
Whether that's about encrypting it or just dealing with the 4K sector things, or if it's dual booting, I think, and ZFS, whatever you want to know about storage. Everything from the GPart to the GNOB to the ZFS, and all the UFS stuff and all those different utilities all covered in there.
Okay. And also send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. And please don't be shy. We love to hear what you have to say. So, hey, if you think we don't talk enough about whatever your BSD of choice is, send us in some info about it. And I'm sure TJ and us would love to see it and get it on the air. Also, watch live Wednesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1900 UTC, and we will enjoy interacting with you on IRC if you hop on, and you can see how we make the show. And also, we have a fun idea for the holidays this year. Just like we asked during the interviews, we also want to hear how viewers and listeners first got into BSD. So email us your stories. That's interesting. Everyone has a different story on where they were first exposed to a BSD system, how they got connected with somebody who ran one.
That's really been my favorite part of the interviews. So I'd love to hear more of that from the audience as well.
Yeah. And so we're asking for either a written or a video version. So if you have some video recording capability, that would be very cool too. And we might be able to put you on the air in a future episode. So we'll read and play some of them for the Christmas. I know, right? This is fantastic.
TJ, you're awesome.
If this is your idea, this is a great one. So we'll try and read and play some of them for the Christmas episode. So we'll have like a very special Christmas episode of how you first got connected to BSD, any of the BSDs. So just let us know what happened there. You got until December 17th to send them in. So that's when we're going to be doing the pre-recording for the episode. So try and get them in here in the next couple weeks. And if you're listening to this after Christmas is over, sorry, too late. You've already missed it. So you can ignore all that we just said.
Also, you're way behind.
Anyway, guys.
I can understand how somebody can get a month behind on the podcast, but...
Oh, it happens. And people find it for the first time, in 2015. It's like, oh, that's an old episode.
But it's been great to see the reaction from the developer community as well. Just the number of developers from all the different BSDs who've mentioned stuff, or like the amount of email I got last week in particular from people commenting on privately to me on things I said on the show, or it was like, oh, well, this is actually over here, or I guess Peter Grehan from Beehive noted that. While having Grub2 support in Lumos won't actually make Lumos just work in Beehive. Yeah, there's another problem because they already have that part solved. They can actually load it. It's the fact that Lumos does a couple of BIOS calls that aren't emulated by Beehive currently.
Sure. Okay. Well, cool. So thank you guys so much for being with us today on this episode. Hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving if you're somewhere that celebrates that tomorrow. And you guys have a good, safe weekend. We'll see you same time next week.